So today we're diving into a really fascinating sermon. It's all about reframing how we think about a higher power. And the core idea? It's less about complex theology and way more about simple, everyday relationship dynamics. Let's get right into it. So the speaker kicks things off with this one simple question. But it's a huge one, right? And it's not a trick question. It's really the foundation for everything he's about to say. Because the answer, he argues, isn't about some objective, universal truth. It's much, much more personal than that.
And here's the kicker. The sermon suggests that it's less about who God is in some grand cosmic sense, and much more about how we choose to see him. And that single choice, that perception, ends up defining the entire relationship.
Okay, so that brings us to our first big idea here, a question of perception. Let's break down how this actually works in a really practical, relatable way.
The speaker uses this fantastic everyday analogy. Think about it. The label you put on someone completely changes the rules of the game, right? It sets the boundaries, the level of intimacy. You treat a pastor with a certain kind of respect and distance. You treat a brother completely differently, much more informally. The person is the exact same, but our perception, our label, changes everything about the interaction.
And this is where he brings it all back around. He applies that exact same logic to the divine. If you see God as some distant, powerful ruler, well, that's exactly how you're going to relate. But what if there's another way to see things?
And that leads us right into the central conflict of the sermon. Section 2, Master or Father. Two totally different ways of looking at this relationship. Now look at the contrast here. It's pretty stark. On one side, you have the master dynamic. This relationship is all about protocol, about asking for permission. A servant comes to a master with a sense of, fear and reverence. They ask for things. But then you flip the coin and you've got the father dynamic. This is about being a son or a daughter. It's defined by just unhindered access, a real intimate bond, and the boldness to say what you need, not as a timid request, but as a natural part of being in the family.
So he actually puts a name to these two styles. The master-servant thing, he calls that covenantal. It's like a formal contract, full of rules. But the father-child dynamic, he calls that relational. It's a deep, personal connection that goes way beyond any piece of paper. And in his view, the relational approach is on a whole other level.
Okay, so this relational thing sounds good, but what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's jump into section 3 and see how he builds this out, the rights of a child.
To make his point, he gets really personal here. He says his kids, they don't wait for an invitation to his room. They just walk right in. They don't knock. Why? Because they're his kids. It's their house, their home. They have a right to be there, a right to access him. There's no protocol, no appointment necessary. And he doesn't stop there. He gives another example. His wife taking money from his wallet. He kind of jokes that he'd like a heads up, but he says, fundamentally, it's her right. Their marriage bond means what's his is hers. It's not about asking for permission. It's about a shared life, shared resources, all built on trust.
And this is how he ties it all together, theologically speaking. He connects these everyday family dynamics to the story of the crucifixion, specifically the moment the temple veil, the huge curtain separating people from the divine presence, was torn in two. For him, that's a powerful symbol. It's the end of protocol. It's the beginning of full access.
Okay, now the speaker kind of switches gears for a second. He uses a modern-day observation almost as a warning. And this brings us to section 4. A lesson from today's youth.
He talks about watching younger people interact with their parents, and he sees what he calls a shocking lack of reverence. Walking slowly when they're called, totally distracted by their phones. It's a generational observation, and you can tell it really bothers him. So what's the point? Well, here's the connection he makes. He basically asks, if that basic model of respect for your earthly parents is broken or eroded, how on earth can you even begin to grasp the concept of relating to a heavenly Father? The way we behave in our human families, he argues, becomes the blueprint for our spiritual life. All right, so let's pull all these different threads together in our final section. Section 5, your relationship, your choice.
And to really land this whole idea of choice, he brings up a classic, a story pretty much everyone knows, the parable of the prodigal son. But he gives it a fresh spin.
So the way he sees it, the prodigal son, the one who messed up big time, he still had a deep relational connection with his father. He knew his dad well enough to have the guts to ask for his inheritance. Now you contrast that with the elder brother. He had a covenantal relationship. He was dutiful, he worked hard, but there was zero real intimacy. He was, and these are the speaker's blunt words, like a donkey working, totally clueless about what was already his. He was basically a servant living in his own home.
And that's the bottom line of the whole thing. The elder brother chose to be a servant. The younger son, even at his absolute worst, never forgot he was a son. The access, the intimacy, the bond, it's not something that's just handed to you. It's something you choose.
So let's leave you with this final thought. Let's take this whole idea and pull it out of its spiritual context for a second. Think about your own life. How does the simple label you put on a relationship, calling someone your boss versus your mentor, an acquaintance versus a friend, how does that completely change the boundaries, the expectations, and the entire potential of that connection? What could open up if you just decided to change the name?